June 12th, 2024. Welcome to our cosmic communion. My name is Sheena with Rise Wellness Village, and this is our weekly prayer for the Way of Namaste. This week we're navigating Gene Key 45, the Shadow of Dominance, the gift of synergy, and the city of communion. Let's go ahead and begin this invocation with the blessing of the 5 elements. Thank you to Richard Rudd for this sweet and simple prayer to call in our celestial support now. Angel of the earth, please purify my physical body. Angel of water, please purify my astral body. Angel of the air, please purify my mental body. Angel of fire, please sanctify my spirit. Angel of the ether, please gather the quintessence. A story comes to mind when I think of this gene key, and trigger warning, this is a sensitive subject about suicide. The year was 2015 and I was amidst my Saturn return, and I had everything I could dream of. I was making about $100,000 a year, and I was living in McAllen, Texas. My rent was $600 a month. I was the queen of the world. I was working my dream job and feeling important by running a cute little southern boutique that served mimosas and champagne. And as a stylist, I was curating fashion shows and meeting important people. By society's standard, I was absolutely crushing it. By then, I had already lived in London, England, and Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, and New Orleans, and DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., and now here I was in a Mexican border town in Texas, the whitest of the white girls, and in for a complete culture shock. I was used to picking up and moving alone. My stellium in Sagittarius and sun in the 8th house can't get enough fresh starts and new beginnings, and McAllen was definitely a fresh start. I had my eyes on Austin, although I wasn't even sure why. It had been a calling for me for years as the place that I'd end up calling home for a while, and my company promised to get me there if I just hang out a little longer with them. My work was my crack, and it gave me sustenance back then, purpose, validation, and a hefty paycheck that made me feel safe, while I also had freedom. I wasn't micromanaged. I got to be my boss, and I got to be trusted with millions of dollars of inventory and money and employees, and it made me feel important. I loved being a leader to young girls because I wanted them to succeed, and I put heart in what I did, seeing people's gifts and reflecting them back to them. When my corporate office forbid us for having friendships and missing business with pleasure, I knew that I was not aligned with maintaining some status, and I regularly broke those rules to invite my management team for a drink and some chips and salsa for our mandatory meetings because my work family was my family, and it just didn't feel true for me to create a hierarchy there. I always joked with my boss that my job was to be invisible, because if I had done my job right, then my team would effortlessly flow whether I was there or not. My job was to be replaceable, and I kept that as a driving force in management. Rather than keeping secrets that would make my team dependent on me, I wanted them to set me free so I could go to the next location, the next start, and start it all over again. After 4 years and 3 states with that company, I heard through the grapevine of an old employee that the company was going under. There were reports of tax fraud and an arrest that would soon close down all of our stores. My management team kept us in the dark, and what little information they shared, they always asked for secrecy so that it wouldn't be spread as gossip to the employees. Well, I couldn't stomach the idea that this ship was going under and no one could tell the truth about it. And what we did know, we were meant to keep a secret from other employees. Keep the morale up. Well, there was one day I arrived to open up our store, and it was chained shut with an eviction notice on the door and a warning. When I called my home office, they assured me it was a mistake and to keep cool while they got things sorted out so that I could go in and conduct business as usual. I called my dad from the parking lot. I didn't know what to do. We ended up having a few long conversations that week. The first one was right there in that parking lot. After I hung up with the home office, I called him to ask him for help. You see, he was my mentor. I saw him as my leader, and I respected his management style because he had empathy. And even though he was a rule follower, he really cared about people. And I always treasured that about him. And I loved his advice because I knew it was coming from a really loving place. Well, I don't remember every word he said during that conversation, though I wish I did, and the ones to follow. I do remember the text he sent that said, "Do not go down with that sinking ship. A deserted island offers some protection. He offers none. Do not go down with that sinking ship." I think of those words often. You see, my dad had a similar twist of fate that day when I called him. As I knew I had just lost my job and it was only a matter of time, he got the same news. Only he had spent 33 years with that company. 33 years and too many holidays and celebrations to count that he had missed for work. My mom said one time she tallied how much time off he had forfeited for them, and it truly was years. Years of sacrifice to work. And for what? They said he had become too expensive to insure and that they could get someone younger and pay them far less. And with constant budget cuts and chips away at his salary, titles, and most importantly, his ego, they left him as a shell of a man. He thought he was worth more dead than alive, and I could hear the despair in his voice, and my sensitivity heightened as I recognized, if I thought I had it bad, holy shit. My dad's trembling voice was reminding me that I am adaptable, and I am clever, and I do have so much potential to go in so many different directions. And as my dad was feeding me all of this in the way that some dads do, I couldn't help but feel like my dad didn't feel the same for his situation. I ping-ponged the compliments right back to him, reminding him that he could finally be a consultant and be paid for his brilliant strategic mindset. Or maybe he could retire young and go work on a farm like he loved when he was younger. I told him he could downsize. They could sell the house. They didn't need it anymore. Us kids were grown and on our own, and there was no reason to hold on to a big home. My dad didn't like change much, and I could tell this conversation was going to be more for me to listen, and so I did. When the store got the chains removed the next day, I went in with my 2 weeks' notice, as my dad had suggested. Our district manager flew in a couple days later to retrieve my keys and send me on my way. I had a private meeting with my management team to let them know what I knew, that we should all start looking for another source of energy, of income, of something to invest our hearts in, because although I didn't know when, I knew this place would be gone soon, and I didn't want them to be taken by surprise. That felt better for me, even if I did have to break the rules about it. And a few days later, on May 6, 2015, I awoke from an incredibly vivid dream where my dad had come to me. He asked me why I had never introduced my boyfriend to him, and he said he really liked him. I actually awoke my partner that morning to tell him, "It's time for you to meet my dad. I want us to fly to Massachusetts." I had a huge nest egg saved up, and there was something so impactful about this dream that I knew I must act on it. And later that day, I was on the phone with my childhood best friend when my mom beeped in. A shockwave entered my system when she told me she had just arrived home to find my father unconscious in the garage. The ambulance was on the way, and she was performing CPR, and I knew he was gone. The image of my dream popped in as I realized, holy shit, he's been gone for a while. I could sense something dishonest in the air, but I didn't know how to move forward. I wanted to hold out hope for my mom, But I learned later that rigor mortis had already set in and she was trying to hold out hope for me. While I may never know exactly what was going through my dad's mind that day, I blame society for breaking him down and making him believe that he wasn't inherently valuable because he was no longer going to be the provider, the problem solver, the fixer, the doer. He was going to have to learn how to receive, and he didn't know how to do that. That task was so insurmountable for him that he didn't know how to do it. It's been 9 years since he took his life, and 9 years since that job stripped me from the ability to live from the outside in. I lost so much safety in the world. I lost my ability to trust in the system. I lost my confidence that if I did the right thing, that good things would happen. And oh boy, did I fall down the stairway of grief. 14 days after my dad's passing, I married that boyfriend and played out the most toxic, narcissistic empath dynamic, leaving me a shell of a human and divorcing him 2 years later. Only then did it even become safe enough to begin to start processing my grief of not only losing my father, but my career, my fundamental way of thinking, my stability, my safety, my identity. Learning different healing modalities became my life. I had to dig myself out of this hole I had dug and learn how not to go down with the sinking ship of life. In 2020, I left my corporate America job and I became a full-time dog walker and pet sitter. All of a sudden, I was spending all day outside, charging in the sun with Audible in my ear, in nature with animals, and slowly, I began healing. I began feeling safe in my body again. I began trusting in the universe again, that I would always have enough, and I always did. I was amazed at how one client turned into 3 referrals, and money just seemed to be coming to me to support this new venture of working for myself. I couldn't believe it at first. It didn't even feel real. I felt so healthy, so refreshed. I was bonding with animals, and I was seeing the magic of nature around me. Soon, I was house sitting and even getting the experience of trying on different flavors of life. And this gift of synergy was flowing right through me when I was in my delight and I was resourced in all of the ways. When I moved in with my partner, I knew I ran the risk of having to start over again. Now I was an hour away from my clients and my business was shifting more into holistic wellness. Well, it has been quite a journey. And this week, I felt the shadow of dominance. And I can feel how I felt in 2015 when I got on the phone with my dad and said, I'm scared of the uncertainty of the future right now, and I don't know what to do. My dad can't write me a check. He can't swoop in and rescue me. He isn't physically here anymore, and I'm still processing not only his death, but also what a catastrophic blow it was to experience financial instability overnight. When I knew exactly where my next large sum of money was coming from, to having to trust that if I was in the frequency of prosperity, that it was going to find me. No longer validated by anything outside of me, but having to provide everything from within. There's a part of my soul that remembers synergistic living. I remember when we lived communally. And there was no wanting it for anything. We had it all, and we didn't claim any of it. Everything was all of ours. People, food, resources, land, we shared, and it wasn't crunchy and complicated. It was just love in motion, without ego attachment anywhere. And oh, how I miss that level of communion sometimes. And I can long for it in the moments I feel separate and in a lack paradigm. Because this society has glamorized money and power and control so much. Building the template for this virtual community, the Way of Namaste, is my devotion to returning back to that Essene essence of prosperity through generous relating and conscious co-creation. I know someone out there isn't going to come and rescue me. And I know I have to be accountable. And I also know I'm not meant to do this alone. None of us are. We are all learning how to build new structures that aren't based on money, but creating more value in our worth and in our goods and services. The way of Namaste is the way of yoga. And yoga means to yoke. To yoke is to come into community, to communion with our humanity and our divinity, and recognizing that our prosperity flows within this conscious creation. The connection that we invest in our time with one another, and there's no limit to the potential of abundance that flows through that. Maybe someone inspires a business opportunity or refers a friend to a service. Maybe we plan a pilgrimage and a retreat together. Maybe someone shares a service or a product that they're offering to someone else in some other corner of the world that would otherwise never know about it. And this is how we generate abundance, is by sharing the good news. The good news is our gospel. And this was the story the Bible was meant to share, to tell us how to be resourceful by tapping into our inherent gifts. And I know that starts with me. So this week, here I am, sharing a portion of my story, because my gift is in the embodiment of learning that healthy is wealthy, that being in a regulated nervous system is gold. Don't let society tell you otherwise. Being able to be with our emotions is the difference between being an addict and staying aware, to reacting and responding. And we have to be discerning these days around who to give our time and attention to, because some people are just here to drain us, and that's their design. And we're going to see that in our society a lot. And so for me, cosmic communion is about recognizing the value in people and pumping people up with love rather than taking, caregiving rather than caretaking. Richard Rudd says about this gene key of communion, for the grace of Christ to enter you, you must be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, to give up your lower bodies and their desires, feelings, dreams, memories, and knowledge, and to be taken over by a greater being who has all along been waiting within you. To enter through this great initiation is to die into the second aspect of the sacred Trinity, the Christ. This makes me think of the descent of Inanna as well, when she arrives at the gates of hell and she has been stripped of everything. Her sense of safety, her root chakra, her ability to be with her emotions, her sacral chakra, and her vitality and power, her solar chakra. And only then, when the ego has been completely dissolved, does grace so peacefully and gently arrive. I'm grateful that it was my dad who taught me not to rely on this Maya, to see it for what it is, a place to come to and learn from, a place to rummage through our karma, a place to play. I wish my dad had more of that when he was alive, but I'm grateful that he experiences that now. The gift of communion has allowed me to have my dad with me everywhere now. It was my work to find out how to create purpose out of this life, and now it's my purpose to live that out. There will be days that will be harder than others, and that's okay. My question this week during this Virgo moon has been, am I doing the best that I can? Instead of worrying about what everyone else is doing, how am I doing? Am I doing my best? And if I am, and God, I know I am, can I believe the same for everyone else so that I can stop judging and offer more love to where more love is so desperately needed on our planet? Sure, it's easy to fall into a victim place when the world seems to get off on hysteria so much. But I invite you this week to stay true to your heart. Learn to discern and recognize that heaven is a vibrational state of being. And it doesn't cost any money to get there. You don't need a special title to access it, and you don't have to earn it either. It just is. My prayer to you this week is that you feel the communion with the divine all around you. Each time you find yourself on the crossroads, remember, this is your choice point. Which character would you like to embody? Which perspective would you like to entertain? Maybe zoom out. Maybe zoom out even a little bit more. What's something you notice when you have a wider frame? Maybe you see that grace is there. Maybe there's a little less judgment and more love. When we can remember that we're just doing the best we can, and it costs $0 to send a little love out into the world. Thanks for being here with me. I love you. Namaste.